Hello, I'm Rosie from Healthy Selfish, and in just under a week, I am going to be running a workshop called How to Care Less What Other People Think and Back Yourself All the Way. And there are still some tickets left for that, and you will find those in my bio. Now, in preparation for this workshop, I have been having a number of discussions with people who have made radical changes in their life and have had to really learn to back themselves all the way. So in a moment, I'm going to be talking to Oliver Radclyffe. Now, Oliver is a trans man, and when I first met him, he was still presenting as female. He was in his early 40s and he had just come out as a lesbian. Since then, he has come to the understanding that he was born into the wrong body. And I am going to be talking to him about what it's like to realise that you have been living a lot of your life not able to be who you truly are. And he has just requested to join, so I'm going to welcome him now. I'm going to say hello to some of the people who've joined. Hello, Ali. Hello, Rachel. Hi, guys. And there is Oliver!
Hello.
Hi!
Hello, sweetie. How are
So
you doing?
nice to see you. I'm
It's
so good.
very nice to see you.
Yeah. So tell me, where in the world are you?
Okay, I am in Connecticut, about an hour north of New York,
Mhm.
where I've been living for the last 12 years. Last time I saw you, we were in Italy together.
We were at the lovely Rachel Barraclough's wedding,
At
and
the
we will get on
lovely.
to that because I want to talk about the first time I met you,
Yes,
which was on a girls' holiday,
that's
really.
right. At Rachel's place in France. We do get around, don't we, Rosie? I
We're
mean,
so
seriously.
jet set.
I
And
know.
you arrived and you were using a different name at that
Yeah,
time, and you were
that's
still presenting as female,
that's.
and you were gorgeous with
Oh,
your
thank you, sweetie.
long blonde hair and your maxi dress and your bikinis and your gorgeous four children. But you had a massive part of your story that you were telling then was
Yes.
that you had just come to the understanding that you were attracted to women. And I'm
Yes.
wondering, was it a thunderbolt moment when you realised that?
No.
Okay.
So it was not a thunderbolt moment. It was a thunderbolt moment when I decided to go public with it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very big deal because that was a huge changing point in my life. But I had known on some subconscious level all my life that I was attracted to women. Well, since puberty, since, one starts being attracted to anybody at all. But, coming from our background back in the 1980s, nobody was gay. Um, and occasionally you might bump into gay men who were frightfully glamorous and usually work in the fashion industry, but lesbians, no, God, no, that wasn't a thing, was it? So I wasn't just closeted most of my life, I was in full scale denial. And when I moved to America, I met up with an old friend, an old English friend who had moved out here and was living this very bohemian life in the East Village in New York. And it was kind of this eye-opening moment when I realized that there were other ways to live. And at the time I was married and I had 4 children. So coming out was a huge deal because it really, I knew that this was going to upend my entire life. But it got to the point where I couldn't stay in the closet anymore because I was having very physical symptoms. Um, and I think this is something that would really interest you in the work that you do and the kind of conversations that you have with people, because I thought I was having some kind of a nervous breakdown, and then I thought I was ill, like sick, and I was being tested by the doctors for things like autoimmune disease and multiple sclerosis and all these different things that they thought might account for the fact that I was experiencing very physical symptoms. I had this awful aching in my body, and I was losing weight, and my hair was falling out, and it was really scary until a doctor diagnosed me with something that's not very well known called tension myositis syndrome, which is basically when you are repressing something, when the effort of repressing something becomes so overwhelming that in order to divert your mind from what it doesn't want to see, your body creates physical symptoms. So in a sense, this was my body saying, coming out is going to be really scary and socially potentially destructive. You know, don't do it. I'm going to divert your brain from, you know, what you need to do by creating this physical sickness.
So when you went to visit the doctor and the doctor explained that to you, did you then think, oh?
I knew immediately. I knew immediately what it was. So I knew immediately what it was, and I knew I had to address it.
What did that feel like in that moment?
Absolutely terrifying.
Right.
Absolutely terrifying. It felt like jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute, because I had no idea how I would get from the life that I was in into a new life, and I didn't know what that new life looked like. So I really did feel like I was stepping off the edge of a cliff into an abyss with absolutely no idea where I was going to land, but I knew that I had to do it. And what's quite interesting was, at that point, I also knew that I was trans.
Oh, right. Okay, well, we're going to come on to that.
Should we come to that? Shall I keep that one as a taster?
I want to deal with the first big, because this was such a huge moment.
Yes.
And what was the hardest thing about coming out? What were you most scared of?
I think what I was most scared of was what I was going to do to my family. So I knew that I was shattering my husband's life. I did not know what consequences that would have on my children, because we were then obviously subsequently going to end up divorced, and that would affect their lives. I didn't know how my parents would react, because they're devout Christians. I didn't know if I would suffer the social ostracization, if that's a word. I didn't know if I would be socially ostracized by everybody that I knew, all the people I grew up with back in England, and this, you know, environment that I was living in here in Connecticut, which was very straight and white. And so I approached it very slowly. I did it step by step, very slowly, actually over a period of years. Just, you know, taking on as much as I could cope with before moving to the next step. So it was a very long and very drawn out process in the end.
Who was the hardest person to come out to?
My father.
And how
coming out to my dad was really hard, because I really love my dad, but he belonged to a religion that believed that homosexuality was a sin, and I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to get over that. And he did. He was amazing. Both my parents were absolutely incredible. They really have been, you know, with me and supporting me every step of the way, which is really extraordinary given the background that they come from. What
does that mean to you?
It means that without the support of my parents and my children, I think I would have, and this is the truth for a lot of people out there, I think I would have spent the rest of my life with my identity feeling like it was something that I had to defend. It puts you in a defensive position. If people don't believe you or understand you or accept you, it puts you in a position of defense, which is very hard. That's a very hard way to live your life. And by accepting me, by my parents accepting me and my children accepting me, who are the most important people in my life, I didn't have to live in that position of defense. I knew that with the people who I most cared about, I could just relax and be myself. And with regards to my friends, they either choose to accept me and remain my friends, or they choose not to, and then, you know, they're free to leave. So those decisions are much easier. But when you're not accepted by your own family, that can be a very long-term painful thing for a lot of people. And it is a lot of people's truth, because a lot of people, when they come out either as gay or trans, are not accepted by their family, and it's incredibly hard.
And did all of your children, were they on board straight away? Or
they were on board straight away, because they were tiny when I came out as gay. So the girls didn't even understand what it was. I had to explain what being gay was to them, and they thought it was marvelous, because they thought I could then marry the mother of their best friend, and then they could be sisters with their best friend, and that was all going to be awesome. And the boys just thought it was cool. My oldest son was 7 at the time. Was he 7? No, he was 9 when I came out to him. And he was just like, yeah, okay, mum. All right, you're gay, that's cool. You know, the things about little kids is they take their cues from the adults. So if the adults are cool with it, they're cool with it. If the adults are not cool with it, they're not cool with it. So by the time I came out to my children, I made sure that everybody in their lives was cool with it so that they could look to the adults for their cues and go, oh, well, everybody else seems to be okay with this, so we'll be fine. So that part of it was actually relatively easy.
Do you think that had anything to do with the fact that you were in America as well?
Yes, I do. And I don't know whether that's because the environment here is easier than it is in England, because I'm not sure that necessarily is, because I think generally across the board in England and in America, homosexual identities are much more accepted now. I think it was easier for me to come out here because I could reinvent myself in this country in a way that I couldn't in England. In England, you know, because of the background I came from, there's a certain way to do things, and I was very tightly enmeshed in that. And I think I would have found it very hard to break out of that and to recreate my own rules, because that's essentially what I had to do. I had to write my own rule book when I came out, because all the old rules didn't work anymore, they didn't apply. So I think being in a different country, whether it's America or anywhere, makes that easier for anybody to do.
And then it all led to a much bigger decision.
It did.
So,
It did. And, you know, this is interesting. And I think, again, this is sort of interesting from a psychological perspective, because I've heard of this happening before. Not in this specific instance, but just generally. When I came out as gay, I knew very quickly that I was also trans. But that was so terrifying to me that I was not prepared to address it or deal with it. And I almost made a conscious decision of, okay, one thing at a time. I can cope just about with coming out as gay and the consequences of that. Coming out as trans, no way. I'm going to put that to one side, and we'll address that if we have to, when we have to. But right now, I'm not going to look at it. And that's what I did for 7 years. I tried not to look at it. And the more comfortable I got within my gay identity, the more the reason not to look at it started to disappear. Because my original reason not to look at it was fear and the fact that I couldn't cope with any more disruption in my life. But then I was comfortable, I was out, everybody had accepted me, my life had changed, I was surrounded by mostly queer people anyway, who were totally cool, and we're having all these conversations about gender identities. And, you know, I was in a world where it was much more accessible. I was starting to learn the language, because there's a lot of language around this that really helps when you're trying to figure out your identity. So I started trying to figure out who and what I was and how far I needed this to go and what it meant for me, because there are so many moving parts when you come out as trans. So I started to try and figure all of that out, and eventually started talking about it 3 years ago, which was when I first started the whole process of transitioning.
And it sounds as though you've peaked out. You've slowly but surely peeked your way out, and then found, okay, this is okay. Safe. This is okay. Yeah.
So for the first year, I did it in private. So my immediate family knew, my then partner knew, my parents knew, and I didn't tell anybody else.
Transitioning. Yeah.
So the first year was done entirely in private, because it was really scary bringing that outside the front door. And then I went public on Facebook. And the reason I went public on Facebook was because I knew, with the people that I had been speaking to, I knew that there were a lot of questions. It was something that was much less easy to understand than being gay. And I felt that I didn't want rumors flying around, and I didn't want people to feel uncomfortable about talking to me about it. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to do a Q&A on Facebook, and I'm going to hit all the frequently asked questions, and I'm going to answer them all. And I'm going to say, it's okay if you don't understand this, because a lot of people don't, and it is complex. So please ask, as long as you're respectful and polite, and as long as you accept my identity, please, you can ask me anything you like.
That's very
great. I went public.
So you mentioned there's a lot involved in transitioning. What is actually involved?
Well, the first part of it is working out the balance between your gender and your sex. And this is the bit that is most confusing to people, because the simplistic way of looking at transitioning is that your gender, what you feel inside, does not align with your sex, which is your body. And in a sense, my transgender identity does actually fit that very old school model, in that my internal gender is male, my brain believes that my body is male, and yet my body is physically female, which creates something called dysphoria, which is incredibly uncomfortable. And the way dysphoria manifests is it's not, this idea that you hate your body is not quite accurate. It's just, it's not yours. So even when I was in my teens and 20s, when my body was frankly bloody gorgeous, you know, I could look at it in a mirror and go, yeah, I understand that objectively speaking, that's a great body, but it's not mine. It doesn't, it feels really uncomfortable. And having to present as a woman, having to wear makeup and have long hair and keep all that going and behave in a way that people expect of you, it's really, really uncomfortable. And it just creates this low-level background anxiety that permeates your whole life. And once I started understanding what that was, when I came out as a lesbian, I started getting rid of all the kind of, slowly dropping all the femininity, which took some time, because in my head, my internalized homophobia said to me, if I'm going to be a lesbian, I'm going to be a really stylish, glamorous lesbian, right? I'm going to be the best lesbian ever. So that involved being gorgeous all the time, as you discovered when I was in France, when I was in the height of my, I'm too scared to be what I am, therefore I've got to be really, really gorgeous to compensate for the fact that I'm this creepy person who's attracted to women.
But I do remember at that time, you were already talking about how your personal trainer, you were encouraging your personal trainer to help you shape your body to be more masculine.
Yes.
It was already...
That's amazing that you can remember that. That's awesome, Rosie. Because that was right at the beginning when I first started coming out. But yeah, wow, I can't believe you remember that. That's great. So yeah, so that was a whole process before I started transitioning, was shedding the female stuff, wearing less makeup, cutting my hair, you know, working my body, flattening my abs, all that kind of stuff. And then very soon after I came out, I realized that the thing that was most important for me was to have top surgery, because these things had to go. They just had to go. They just had to go. So I got that booked in. I changed my name legally, which was really exciting. And I have recently started taking testosterone, and that was, funnily enough, last on my list. And again, that was due to fear, because I was so afraid. Weirdly enough, top surgery was not frightening for me because it felt so necessary. But taking testosterone felt like that final step into, you know, out of a kind of non-binary status, really into trans man. And it took a while for me to be able to make that, because again, I was afraid of people's reactions. I was afraid that I wouldn't be attractive anymore. And I think that is a huge fear for trans people, that they're used to being seen as attracted as attractive in one gender. And there is a fear, if they walk away from that they will not be seen as attractive in the gender that they are beginning to present as. So yeah, it's a process. It takes a while.
So there's that fear of not being seen as attractive, and then there's that desire to go that extra step of the way. What tipped the balance and made you decide that you would go for the testosterone?
What tipped the balance was the realization that the person I am with 100% of the time is me. And if I'm with a partner, I'm only ever with that partner for a percentage of my time. And ultimately, what I need to see every morning when I get up and I look in my bathroom mirror is a man, because that is who I am. And as long as I'm looking at any traces of femininity in that mirror, or hearing any traces of femininity in my voice, or in my appearance, or my presentation, or the way I move through life, I'm causing myself discomfort. And the only way for me to stop causing myself constant discomfort is to allow myself to be the gender that I am, which is male. And so there is no relationship out there that is worth sacrificing that comfort for. And ultimately, I mean, I hope it's not going to happen, but ultimately I would choose to be on my own for the rest of my life, within myself and the person that I am, and be comfortable and happy within this person, than to be in a relationship. And this turned out to be true because my partner, who I had thought that I was going to spend the rest of my life with, left me when I started transitioning. And that was 2.5 years ago. And I can safely say that I'm happier now, not because she's gone, but I'm happier now because I am who I am than I was in my relationship with her, however much I loved her.
You're able to be yourself.
Yeah.
Which is more important.
Which is more important. And, you know, when you're talking, you know, it's a thing that people talk about all the time. And when I first came out of the closet, I remember laughing at this sort of idea, this platitude of just be yourself. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what you're telling me to do. I don't know what myself is. How can I just be myself? I haven't got the faintest clue what that is. And it took me 10 years to figure it out. And ultimately that platitude is true. And it's an extreme example when you're trans, because when you're trans, you are just really not yourself if you're not presenting in your correct identity. So this idea of going out into the world and performing every minute of every day is really extreme when you're somebody who is trans who hasn't transitioned. And then when you do finally take those steps to transition and you go through that process, which can take a really long time because it is really scary, when you finally get to that point where you are living in your authentic self and you're presenting in a way that makes people read you correctly, it is an extraordinary experience. It really is. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary to realize how much discomfort we allow ourselves to live with in order to please other people, or in order to be attractive to other people, or to be what other people want us to be, you know. And I think this is a universal condition that we all have, that we want to be what other people want us to be, but ultimately it's not what's going to make us happiest.
Yeah, and I wonder, because obviously sex and gender and sexuality are a big part of your story.
Yes.
But there are other people who have got other changes they want to make, or they feel like they're performing in a certain way.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like peeling off the layers of your sexuality is helping you to be more who you are, or do you still feel like there's layers of yourself still to come that have got nothing to do with that?
I don't know. I can't do it all. I mean, I never say never. There's maybe more down the line. Who knows what changes are? But, you know, there was this process of, well, if I'm going to stop being this, I'm going to stop being everything. You know, all the things that are expected of me, I'm not going to do those anymore. And if it doesn't feel right to me, I'm just not going to do it. So I had a career change. I moved house. I changed a lot of my friends. You know, there was a lot of changes that came with, you know, a daily inspection of, is this me or is this not me? And if it's not me, it's going to go, because I'm just not going to do that anymore. Because really, you know, once you've come out as gay and transitioned, you're really not pleasing anybody. You know, no, you're not doing that to please anybody else on the planet except you, because nobody's like, yay, go transition, that would be awesome. Now I'm going to have to remember new pronouns and your name, and I'm going to have to figure all this out. You know, you only do that for yourself. You do that for yourself because you have to, but you then become a better person to everybody in your life, because you're more available, because you're happy, because your brain cogs are not constantly caught up in this daily grind of trying to exist in this discomfort that you're in. So I'm more accessible to my children. I'm more accessible to my parents. I'm a better friend. I'm a useless bloody friend, but I'm a better friend. You know, all these parts of my life just work better now that I've transitioned. And you know, and to your point, I think that, you know, a huge amount of the people who tune into you for this very reason have like this tiny element of what I'm talking about, because they are doing things that they have learned because it's expected and they've internalized without necessarily stopping and saying, is this really what I want to do? Is this who I want to be? Is this how I want to live my life? Is this how I want to present? Is this, you know, is this coming from me or is this coming from somebody else?
Even down to, because I can see behind you, you've got your bookshelf, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether this is Oliver's bookshelf, or would the person that I met in 2014 have chosen
None of
the
those
same
books.
stylings?
Probably not. Probably not. Well, you know, I moved house.
Yeah.
And my children hate me, right? Because we live out in suburbia in Connecticut, and all the houses out here, it's all kind of grey, neutral tones. Okay, so my house is like, it's like a junk shop. It's every room is painted a different color. It's full of crap from flea markets and antique shops and all the rest of it. And it's very un-suburban American. And my children are like, Mom, we live in an old people's home. And I'm like, I don't care. This is how I want to live. So this is how I'm going to live. I couldn't have lived this way in, you know, when I was married to my husband. I could, but now I'm damn well going to live this way.
Yeah.
So, you know, these tiny little details, you know, are all part of, no, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to do it now. And you're just going to have to get on with the ride or get off the train.
I want to ask you, we were at a wedding together. Yes. The lovely Rachel Barrett,
the lovely Rachel,
on this, watching us right now.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Rach. And at that time, so you were not yet, you had your gender reassignment surgery, but
yes.
You had not yet started
testosterone.
Testosterone. And you
That's right.
were also wearing the most incredible
gold suit.
Gold suit. Catherine Norman waved as well. So you were wearing your amazing gold suit and your linen blouse, and you looked incredible. But perhaps because of the gold suit, perhaps because of the no testosterone yet, and perhaps because of some of the people who were there who were pretty conservative, when you introduced yourself as Oliver, there was sometimes a moment of confusion and, dare I say, awkwardness.
Yes.
In fact, I think someone even said, sorry, did you say Olive?
Or Olivia. I get Olivia? No. Oliver. Olivia? No. Yeah.
How do you cope with that kind of awkwardness?
Well, I mean, there's two things that happen in those moments. One is I hate it. I find it very distressing. And two is I get it. You know, I understand that people read what they see. You know, when they're presented with something, it's a constant struggle in the transgender community, because it is so hard for us to be seen as who we are. It is very hard for us to be seen by the world how we feel inside, because we live in a binary world where there is man and woman, he and she, female and male, and 99.9% of the world sees people in those binary terms. And when you're transgender, the world stops being binary like that. You know, those two separate poles of existence really just cease to exist. So, you know, I'm obviously incredibly patient in understanding that people always read me as female, and correcting them politely. And then after I've corrected them politely, my expectation is that they will respect that and try and remember it. And when they slip, which they do, they will just correct themselves and move on and not make a big deal out of it. So it is something that as transgender people, we do just accept as part of our lives. It was a large part of me going on testosterone because my voice really was the thing that misgendered me so much, because my style is always going to be flamboyant. But this is, you know, one of the jokes I made is that I'm not a masculine woman, I'm a feminine man. I want to be David Bowie, right? I want to be able to wear whatever the hell I want, gold suit and all, but still be read as male. And as long as I'm not on testosterone and I have a high voice because I have a very small stature, I'm going to be read as female, and I get that, and I totally understand it. And then there is going to be constant explanation, which is exhausting. So the joy of going on T is that I'm already beginning to hear I sound a bit Eartha Kitt at the moment, which is quite sexy, but I hope that it will keep going down. So already on the telephone, I don't necessarily immediately get gendered as female, whereas I always was before. And there may come a stage where people do. Okay, I got called sir once in the car a little while ago. It was a very, very exciting moment for me. But I'm hoping in the future that will happen more often. It's not going to happen in university because I'm tiny, you know, I'm 5'3". I'm a very, very small man, you know, and I do have a slightly flamboyant style, and I'm not going to lose that. So it is just one of those things that we kind of learn to live with, and each trans person makes a decision in themselves as to how much they want to conform with a binary gender, how far they want to go, how much they are prepared to accept being misgendered, how they're going to deal with that misgendering. And I think that as more conversations like this happen, more you know, with people like you having conversations with people like me, and it becoming a little bit more of a public discourse, people will begin to understand that it's okay to ask for someone's pronouns. It's really, if you have any doubts, it's one of the politest things you can do. Little things like that that just make our lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, because a lot of the discussion around Black Lives Matter back in the summer, which is obviously a different issue but has some similarities, was that I noticed quite a lot of anger with people saying, you know, don't ask a Black person, educate yourself. And you know, there is that fear that it's the same is the case with the trans community. It's like, dare I ask?
I think it depends who you're asking. I think you can ask whether you can ask. When it comes to education, there are some people who are willing to give up that information, and some people are like, oh God, I can't. I've got too much other stuff on my plate. So, you know, but asking for someone's pronouns is always polite, I believe. And sometimes somebody doesn't have an answer, in which case, fair enough. It's just about sensitivity. It's about sensitivity and accepting that what you see isn't always the whole story, and that as long as you're respectful and polite, it's okay to have these conversations. And as long as you're prepared to accept what somebody says, and also understand that if somebody's in the early stages of transition, they may change their mind, and that's okay. Because there is a kind of process of trying things on to see what fits and what doesn't, and how far you want to go and where you want to stop, and what components make up the person that you are. It's not a one size suits all identity. So, you know, there were periods early on when how I was talking about myself was changing a lot, and it may go on changing in the future. So, you know, the patience of understanding that a trans person's identity is something that is often constantly evolving is very important. And the patience to understand that sometimes if you ask a trans person for explanations and clarification, you know, like you have of me in this particular forum, they're absolutely willing to sit and talk about it for a long time. And other times that trans person may have gone through a period where they have suffered a great deal of pushback from the general public, and it becomes exhausting. And then they just want to go in a hole and hide and say, no, I really can't answer your questions right now because I need some time to get myself back onto my feet before I can step back out there again. Because the thing about being trans is it does turn you into a political person. Every time you step out of your front door, you're essentially making a political statement, and that is something that you then carry out with yourself the whole time. And this is why when you say it, you know, there are comparisons with the people in the Black Lives Matter movement. There are, because I never understood before I came out as trans how if you're Black, you carry that as a political act outside your front door every time you walk out of the house. And sometimes that can become really overwhelming. And that is also true of being trans. And sometimes it becomes overwhelming. I'm like, okay, I just want to go home and be me in the privacy of my own home and not have to answer questions for a while.
But it also affects your kids, doesn't it? And I wonder, have they experienced any transphobia?
They have. They have more in kids at school saying stupid things because they're ignorant. And what I've taught my kids is you cannot expect a middle school kid to understand this. issue because most adults can't understand it. So when they say something stupid, roll your eyes, correct them, explain it, and move on. Because the majority of the transphobic stuff that comes at my kids is really just based in ignorance. If they persevere and it becomes aggressive, then you come to me and we have a chat with the teacher about it. But mostly, you know, if you just roll your eyes and act like they're being stupid and explain the situation to them, they will let it go and move on. And that has actually largely been their experience.
Have you seen any of them be affected by it?
Yeah, early on, I think me coming out as trans was harder for them to explain to their friends than me coming out as gay. Firstly, I was much younger when they were much younger when I came out as gay, so it was kind of part of the general vocabulary as they started school. And it's easier to explain. You know, my mum likes women. That's relatively straightforward. Trans is different. It is much more complex. It's much harder for a kid to explain. It's much harder for a kid to explain, okay, that's my mum, and he's a he, and he's a guy, but he sounds like a woman, and we still call him mum. You know, it's tough. So they have learned, you know, they're wise souls now. They've learned how to negotiate that territory because they've had to. And it's not always been easy. But now they've kind of got it down pat. They don't take any shit from anybody, excuse my language. But yeah, it was a process of learning for them as well. And I had to, you know, really go at a slow pace for them. And out of the four of them, the eldest calls me Oliver because he finds it easier. He's in high school. And the other three still call me mum, which is gendering, but that is their name for me and always has been. And I don't want to take that away from them before they're ready. So if they at some stage in the future are ready to call me something different, that's absolutely fine. For now, if they want to call me mum, that's fine too.
And knowing that it was hurting them, did it ever make you think maybe I won't go any further with this?
Yes, it did. It's terrifying. It's a terrifying process knowing that something that you have to do could have a negative effect on the people you love the most. It's really scary. But I had to do it because what they need, in the same way that what I needed more than anything was to be comfortable with myself, what they need more than anything is a parent who is able to parent, who is able to show up for them and live authentically and model how to live authentically to them, you know, to model by their very existence. Whatever you want to be when you grow up, you get to be it. Because, hey, if I get to be transgender, you get to be anything you want. There are no rules. There are no parameters. There are no gendered roles in this house. Nobody gets to do something because they're a boy or doesn't get to do something because they're a girl. So they're growing up with a completely different structure to how we were brought up in our very kind of, this is what the mum does and this is what the dad does. I'm like, hey, I'm both. You know what? We all do anything now. So although it's hard, it's also extraordinarily liberating.
Yeah, that's actually the flip side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So my final question,
Sure.
there's going to be lots of people watching this and also who coming to my course who would love to make a change. They'd love to do something. They'd like to be different in some way. What is your advice to anyone who is worried about being themselves, making that change because they're worried about what other people will think about them?
What I would say is use a metaphor that, and this isn't mine, somebody else gave this to me years ago. This idea that you're standing on a hill and across the other side of a valley you can see another hill, and you don't want to be on this hill, you want to be on that hill, right? But in between this hill there's a very, very deep valley. It's the Grand fucking Canyon, and you're going to have to get through that, and it's going to be really, really hard, and you know it's going to be hard. My advice is do it. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy because it's not. But whatever those hardships are, believe me, they're worth it. Whatever you have to go through to get to that place where you are where you want to be and you're the person you want to be and you're living your life authentically, do it. Because there is nothing else that you have in your life that will give you the same sense of peace and serenity that being your self-will. Nothing. However, whatever you have to lose, it's going to be worth losing to get there. It doesn't mean you go there first. It doesn't mean you blow everything up overnight. You know, you can do it slowly, do it piece by piece, you know, one step at a time. You don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. All those things are true. But trust me, when you get to the other side, it will all have been worth it.
That's so inspiring.
You're an inspiration, Rosie.
You are my absolute hero, Oliver.
And also buy my book when it finally comes out.
Book.
Follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, Oliver
please.
Radclyffe. What's the book called?
Well, at the moment, it's got a working title, so it's not, you know, this is not necessarily what it's going to be published under. But if you follow me on, it's called Frightened Horses.
Oh, I love that.
There's my tattoo.
Yeah.
But if you follow me on Instagram, you'll get updates, and when it comes out, you can all rush it. And I will sign every single copy individually if you send them to me with your name and a kiss.
I'll be first in line.
Thank
you so much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me on, Rosie.
Lots of love.
Lots of love, sweetie.
And see you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.